From the classics that shot the genre onto TVs everywhere all the way to some of the more recent films that will define my generation's horror. Let's get spooky and dive right into the top 10 terrifying horror movies you need to pray before watching. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have The Strangers. Alright, this is my list, so I'm starting off with my favorite horror movie of all time. This movie, directed by Brian Bertino, starring Liv Tyler and Scott Speedman, is truly an incredible blend of cinema, suspense, a bit of gore, and it's the sort of real-life factors of this one that just really get me. The movie is basically set in a remote sort of cabin area, and a couple is there for the night after an evening out and a bit of a relationship blowout. The pair suddenly finds themselves in the house that they're in, surrounded by strangers in masks who are wanting to play a deadly game. The movie is terrifying, it really is so good, and the ending isn't disappointing, which is always a nice treat. Like I mentioned, it's the reality of this one that really is terrifying. Serial killers are a very real thing, and it's a thing that is a lot more tangible than ghosts and demons. This spooky season, The Strangers has to be on your must-watch list. In our number 9 spot today, we have The Shining. One of the most famous horror movies of all time, this film, based off of the Stephen King novel of the same name, was directed by Stanley Kubrick and stars Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall. This movie is so famous for a reason. Jack Nicholson plays the central character, an aspiring writer who accepts a job as the off-season caretaker of the famous Overlook Hotel. He, his wife, and son head to the isolated hotel, but after a winter storm leaves the family stuck there, Jack's sanity slowly slips further and further away due to some potentially supernatural influences that reside in the hotel. It is horrifying, it's a classic, and it is a huge part of the horror genre. In our number 8 spot today, we have As Above, So Below. This movie is one absolute ride. Directed by John Eric Dowdle, this film stars Perdita Weeks as an archaeologist who is dedicated to finding the Philosopher's Stone. No, this is not a Harry Potter crossover. This stone is a real-life artifact and is rumored to grant eternal life as well as to turn any metal into gold. The search for the stone leads her and a crew into the Paris catacombs, and as they document their journey to find this hidden artifact, they begin to uncover the secrets that lie below the city streets. It really is a terrifying, kind of disorienting movie. It's very good, it's very scary, and it's very suspenseful. In our number 7 spot today, we have Creep. Okay, there's a couple Creep movies, but today I'm talking about the 2014 found footage style psychological horror film. This movie was directed by Patrick Brice and was also written by him along with Mark Duplass, and the two were also the stars of the film. This film is one of the strangest I have ever watched, but I had to put it on this list because it left me with the most eerie, uncomfortable feeling I have ever had in my life. There's just something about this one that really stuck with me, and I don't think I'm the only one. Basically, Patrick Brice plays a videographer who ends up finding a job where he has to record the very eccentric character that Mark Duplass is playing. The pair said they were inspired to create this movie by other classics like My Dinner with Andre, Misery, and Fatal Attraction. It is said that they changed a lot about this movie as they filmed, which left there being multiple versions of each scene, along with several alternate endings, but I have to say the ending they went with was definitely the best, most skin-crawling choice. I haven't seen the other options, but I just know that based on what I did see. There was a sequel to this film that was released in 2017 that I haven't dared to watch yet, and a third is said to also be in the works. In our number 6 spot today, we have The Watcher. We've got to give some love to a new 2022 horror, and based on the newest horror movies I've seen, if it's gonna be any movie, I'm gonna give it up for The Watcher. Directed by Chloe Okuno, this movie is about a woman who moves with her husband to Bucharest, and she quickly starts to suspect that a stranger from the building across the street might just be watching her. This is one of those movies that makes you question everything you know. There's suspense, there's twists, there's turns. It's generally just a really great movie. Micah Monroe, who plays the main character, does a really great job, and all in all, I would say that this is a really good watch for this October spooky season that we're in right now. In our number 5 spot today, we have Hereditary. Alright, I'm not gonna lie to you, you're all my friends. When I saw this movie, I was not in love with it, but whether you love this movie or hate it, I think we can all agree that there's at least a jarring scene or two that we wish we could erase from our memory. Hereditary is a psychological thriller that was written and directed by Ari Aster, and it stars Toni Collette, Alex Wolff, Millie Shapiro, and Gabriel Byrne, who all play a family that is being sort of haunted by a mysterious presence. This all begins after a death in the family, the death of their really secretive grandmother. After her passing, truly all hell breaks loose. Many people consider this movie to be one of the best of all time, praising both the direction as well as the performance of the actors. There's eerie vibes, there's shocking moments, and the ending is wild. It's definitely a movie to watch if you haven't seen it yet. In our number 4 spot today, we have The Conjuring. We have to include this movie today, if for any reason, because it is the one that inspired an entire franchise. The Conjuring universe is based on cases of paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren, but this first movie is based on the story of the Perron family, who started to experience paranormal happenings in their family home. This supernatural horror was directed by James Wan, and it stars Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga as the investigators. If paranormal movies are your thing, The Conjuring definitely is a great one. The first film in the franchise received quite a bit of praise from critics who enjoyed not only the performances, but the direction, the writing, the entire atmosphere of the movie, and also the score. It really adds some incredibly creepy elements to the film as well. If you're going to watch only one Conjuring movie, I'd say that this is the one to watch. In our number 3 spot today, we have The Poltergeist. Released in 1982, this movie is an absolute classic. As biography.com put it, quote, "When you mix a daughter who communicates with spirits living inside a TV set, a backyard that becomes a swimming pool of muddy skeletons, a wolf beast demon that lives in a closet, and Steven Spielberg's genius, you get the perfect formula for blockbuster scariness." That couldn't be more true, but what's even scarier than this movie is the story of the curse that the movie left behind. Most of the stories of this curse are fueled by the deaths of multiple cast members who all passed away either during or shortly after the filming. To make matters even more mysterious, 2 of these deaths were completely shocking and totally unexpected. Some people believe that because Spielberg insisted on using actual human skeletons rather than props as a way to save money, he might be responsible for bringing the curse on set. All in all, this movie is a classic with a chilling tale to go hand in hand with it. In our number 2 spot today, we have The Human Centipede 2. Yeah, we're skipping over 1 and going right into 2, but to be perfectly honest, it doesn't matter which one. You need to pray to someone before watching these movies. I mean, what in the absolute world? In the first one, we see a deranged German surgeon who creates this human centipede using people he kidnapped, but the second one sees a deranged lunatic who was inspired by the first film to create the same sort of thing. That's some human centipede inception kind of stuff that I am absolutely not on board with. There are rumors surrounding the inspiration of these films because it's a pretty fair question. How did somebody come up with such an idea? Well, no one is exactly sure. The inspirations are just as grim as the film and range from coming up with a horrific punishment for some of the worst kinds of criminals, all the way to being inspired by some of the atrocities seen at Auschwitz. Whatever the true inspiration for these movies really was, they are sufficiently horrifying, if for any reason, just the sheer plot alone. In our number 1 spot today, we have The Exorcist. This movie is another absolutely classic horror film, but it is on this list for an entirely different reason. The 1973 supernatural horror was directed by William Friedkin, and right from its release, this film was controversial. There were some pretty adverse physical reactions from some audiences, and I mean, if you've seen it, there's a few scenes in it that would be pretty jarring for an audience in the 70s, but despite some of the outcry surrounding it, this remains one of the highest grossing R-rated horror films of all time, and this movie has quite an influence on pop culture. I want to specifically talk about one cast member though, a small role, the radiographer. Yeah, you must remember the scene. I mean, there's tons of blood, and it's been praised by medical professionals for its realism, but the radiographer, who was a real-life radiographer and was not an actor, actually went on to become a real-life killer after the release of this movie. In 1979, Paul Bateson was convicted for the killing of film industry journalist Addison Verrill, for which he was sentenced to a minimum of 20 years in prison. In 2003, he was released on parole, which he completed after 5 years. Here's where things get even darker though. This has never been proven, but there are beliefs that Paul is actually responsible for a series of unsolved killings of gay men in Manhattan. Apparently, while in jail, he boasted about having committed these crimes, but unfortunately, no evidence has been concretely found to connect him to these crimes. In the end, while The Exorcist is a terrifying movie that really set the stage for supernatural horror, the real-life story behind it is also the stuff of nightmares. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thanks so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I'll see you again soon. Goodbye!